president, or is it the Umpqua? He says if somebody could get a guarantee like what Lakeview has, he says somebody would borrow the money, Umpqua would loan the money to them, and they would build something up.
I was in a meeting yesterday, land and economic meeting, and the forest supervisors there. They cut 70 million board feet of little bitty timber on the entire forest. We used to cut 14 million in Oregon, in Oak Ridge alone.
Right.
So the resource, there's stuff out that everybody knows that we should be cutting it, except the Forest Service.
Right.
And the conservationists. I had to bite my tongue because the only thing that I actually did was they gave a nice dog and pony show, and at the last end of it they said, for the greatest good.
Right.
So I asked the forest supervisor, you know where that comes from? She said, well, I think so. I said, it comes from the Multiple Use Act of 1964, which said the greatest good for the greatest number over time, which was recreation, logging, all these things.
Multi-use.
She didn't have an answer because she hasn't got ability to have an answer because she's been driven from above. And so that's where we are, is we're being held captive because of policies on the national level and so forth. The stuff they're doing right now they're real proud of are thinnings. We used to go poo-poo with those thinnings because they don't make any volume of board feet. So
Chips.
yeah.
But what I'm saying is
biomass.
the cities,
Yeah.
and the school district, and I went to you guys last year before there was an election, and everybody signed off on that letter, sent it to DeFazio, and, haven't heard anything back, except basically a form letter.
Yeah.
So I'm saying we should keep on that as well, and we should also, Jerry, I know was at a Lane Act meeting that I was at last Wednesday, and there's a group of, there's people who will help us coordinate with these various agencies,
Yeah.
like on the canal issue. It seems like that should be repaired, whether it's a pipe put in there or what. And I also think that railroad into the old mill site we should find money to upgrade that too, whether it's for industry or whatever might come in there someday. To let that infrastructure continue to wither away, and even those water rights, once they're gone, they're gone. And it's really expensive to bring something like that back.
I think your idea about the pushing for federal policy, because Lakeview did get a federal policy change on priority bidding for the local there. There was a USDA guaranteed loan that helped pay for some retooling
Right.
there. That's available. The city doesn't need to sponsor that. That's available to any business person that wants to put a mill site in there through the Business and Industry Loan Program. So
We're never going to have a $5 million a year payroll like what used to be out there. But if we have 10% of that, that's $500,000, which we certainly could use right now.
Right, and coincidentally, the amount that they can approve locally in Oregon is $5 million on those loans. So.
Right. But the Pope and Talbot payroll was $5 million annual.
Yeah, wow.
So if we could just get a portion of that back,
Sure.
that's a piece of the puzzle. And it wouldn't harm recreation, because this was always a recreation timber, like Jerry said, multi-use area.
Sure.
That blended really well for years.
So one of the things that I'd like to ask you guys before I turn this over to the council for their comments, and you guys have a conversation here, and I'll just listen, is I've heard a couple things that are sort of in conflict. I'd like to get that sort of fleshed out, because on one hand, I've heard that we're not business friendly, we're too bureaucratic, we're too regulatory. On the other hand, I'm hearing that some of our problems need to be more bureaucratic, not more bureaucratic, but more, let's say, authoritarian and enforcing our ordinances. And to do that, these folks at the council and city manager and the staff really need to have some citizen support for the outcomes and the goals. Maybe not for the process. And so I'd really like to hear something about how you feel about that. If we begin to enforce our nuisance abatements ordinance and our solid waste ordinances, particularly, and we focused on Highway 58. Can we count on some folks here maybe saying, well, you know, we don't like it anymore, like it either, but we like the outcome, and we have to do it. We don't have another way to do it. So that's rhetorical. I just like some feedback on that, because I think that we're in sort of a rough spot.
You have to do those things, so I don't object to them, because in the end, they benefit all of us. And after listening the last time and doing all of the things you talked about there, I went home and really thought about, was that stuff going to really benefit the citizen? Are we going to be able to pay them back some way, somehow? So that we have to pay this through our taxes. And I suggested that if we're going to get a medical place here, I'd be willing to pay, an extra $10 or something a month in my property taxes to go to support a doctor or a medical group. That's fine. I don't like to do that. I don't want it. But I sure as hell don't want my water rates raised either. I can't drink the water I've got now. It's so damn bad. It tastes bad. It meets all the federal standards, but even my dogs won't drink it. It's bad.
That's true.
So, if we're ever going to harp on that until we figure out what's going wrong with it. And the new tank may fix that, from what I understand
It
from
won't
Kevin.
fix it.
I hope so.
It won't fix it.
Oh, sure. Puncture my bubble.
Little sign for sale.
It's the overall water system that needs to be
It's
upgraded.
the system itself, yeah. And probably all the piping in Willamette City is 100 years old.
Now, when Chuck came down there and was doing all that stuff on Garden Road and putting in that extra stuff, he was, screwing around with the water system. Well, we could drink the water great. So, I mean, as they say,
So we can blame Chuck?
we try.
Yes,
I think we're in a little dilemma because in order to enforce all the ordinance and do everything that we all want to do, we still have to remember there are private property rights. We don't want to violate them.
Right.
So we're in a catch-22. But I really believe in the Constitution, and I don't believe in violating people's private
Well,
property.
Bill, let me point something out along that line. The guy that lives behind me, who will remain nameless, apparently doesn't have trash pickup. So he insists on putting his trash alongside the garage and just letting it mound and mound and mound.
Well,
and mound.
that falls under some different things.
So he
I'm
every
not
once in a while he
agreeing on
gathers it up and he
owning
pulls it
property.
away.
I'm not saying you can't own the property. That's just trying to do it what you want. But like you say, you can't, you're causing a health hazard by doing something. That falls under your
I
grammar.
don't like snakes in my backyard.
So, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
So, but I look at just that side of the house, and the other side of the house, you can pass for a wrecking yard.
That's the stuff.
But, I'm not saying anything about that, I would like to see.
So isn't it really balancing between the rights of private ownership and the public good?
Right.
So you can't do anything you want with your property just because it's your property.
Right.
On the other hand, we have to be mindful of
Yeah,
the
we offer that
restrictions that
junk
we
ammo
impose.
stand, honest to God, I don't know why he doesn't take advantage of it.
Yeah,
Forget about what I was going to say. It's the balancing act.
It's the balancing.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think so again, this is for strategic planning purposes, so we're trying to get steps that we can take. So if we said, you're right, on the private property matters, I don't think anybody here is talking about, infringing on anybody's private property rights, but on health and safety matters, on beautification matters, we're an implied consent state, which means that if you agree to drive a car, then you agree to all the rules. If you just agree to build a house in here, you agree to all the rules. I mean, that's the way the law is, and so it comes with a set of conditions. Nothing's free. We all know that by now. There's none of us young enough to still think there's free stuff out
So
there.
rather, the enforcement should be the last ingredient in beautification.
Right.
There's got to be maybe some education, some incentives, and maybe just selling the fact to some of these property owners that, if the whole area looks good, everybody benefits because,
It's a pride thing.
Rising
It's
tides
the same.
float all boats.
Could we maybe get some
That's what I-
roads paved instead of patched?
We have talked about that, and again, that's a matter of funding. The way I view the strategic plan, and I've worked on it before, and there's many ways to do strategic planning, but you gotta know what is it you wanna do. It's a broad, generic thing. You don't focus in on specifics. You focus in on broad areas like transportation, education, things of that nature. Then you break those pieces into pieces and say, well, transportation, how come we need to fix our streets? We need to do something with highway safety on Highway 58, things of that, those are specifics. And then how do we do that on those things? And then how do we find the funding for it? And when do we want to do it? That's what a strategic plan is. It tells you when you're going to do something, how you're going to fund it, and what it is you want to do, unless there's some other way that you know how to do it.
No, I can't pull a rabbit out of a hat.
But it gives you a step-by-step process till the end product is your completed product at whatever point you say it's going to be. But along the way, you've already identified where the funds are going to come from, how much it's going to cost you, when you're going to do it. And all of these things are valid. Like the beautification thing's been on there for 10 years. But nothing's ever, I shouldn't say nothing, not a lot has happened on Highway 58, for instance. Jim?
I think last year was actually probably the best thing that could have happened to us. Because it caused a major shift in the community and in the council and the city. It's what I'm seeing now, and I'm very encouraged by this, and I've had conversations with several about the change in the attitude in the community right now over the last 6 months or so. I think the strategic planning is pivotal for us. It shows the outside world that we're finally joining the 21st century and that we're coming out of this depression that we've had for the last 20-some years and going forward in it. And that everybody seems to be willing and able and wanting to move forward. A lot of people share with me, though, that they just don't know what to do. And as we continue this process and go through this process and work through this process and talk to each other, then and encourage one another to do these things will happen. I think the strategic plan is a huge piece of this puzzle, of getting us to think about these things, first of all, but also to be able to put them down in some sort of cohesive thought so that we can go get money for some of these projects, because right now they won't give us diddly because we don't have a business plan. We all know that. You can't get money without a business plan. By establishing this and creating this, that is our first step towards that. And some of these other things will come along. But it's a matter of continuing to communicate, which we've always had a problem with in this community. It's all about hearsay instead of communication, instead of getting the facts. And I think, again, as we do this and step through this process and work through this process, what I see happening a year from now, we're going to see a completely different community. And I am very encouraged about that, and that, as good as Uptown is starting to look, 58 will do the same thing. It may take some enforcement to do that, especially with some of these absentee landlords. But we got to put some teeth behind it. And it's a matter of working through it, walking through it, and people volunteering their services, which I'm hearing from people all over going, hey, what do we do? How can I help? Gary and I were talking, he wants to write letters. It's like, great. These are things we need help, because we all have jobs, we all have lives. This is something that, we're doing to do our part.
So the carrot and the stick, back to the balance here. So let me ask you about the carrot. So if we had a program where we rewarded people for improving their property on 58, would that create an incentive on adjoining properties? And it may just be recognition. The city council can recognize those things. It may just be, business of the month, or the most improved storefront, some kind of program like that. It's fairly simple. We've done those things in other communities. Doesn't cost much. It creates that pride, that civic, the civic cohesiveness. What?
Maybe give them some money to
Well, increased property rates is money. I mean, just clean it up, it's gonna,
Uptown is being beautified, did they get any grants of any kind?
Yeah, they did, as a matter of fact. Yeah, they got a grant.
Okay, so if they got some, why can't 58 get some?
Well, I mean, there is some money there. We have to have a program, have a strategy.
but they had a group that formed a committee and went after it as individual private property owners. Same thing in business owners, same thing on 58. They started to do it and it just kind of petered out.
One of the things that I was mentioning.
I read a review of the hotel in the area just yesterday.
One of the things that I mentioned earlier on was the fragmentation that we've had in the community. I'm sorry, I was
Don't let it
talking over.
dissuade you from staying.
What were you saying?
She's talking about some feedback on motel, where the impression of the picture was different than the reality, so, yeah. Is that summary?
Yeah, they said the hotel was beautiful, it was clean.
Oh,
But
I see what you're saying.
The trash on 58 in the city, don't let it dissuade you, because it really is a nice little town.
Mhm.
But to see that,
That's right.
that's what your people are looking at. And when my hometown looks at that, I am embarrassed. Gary knows where I'm from. Okay, we are no Williamsburg, Virginia, we are no Cape May, New Jersey, but we can do a lot better than we are right now.
Jerry, go ahead.
Oh, actually, I was just saying, you know, we're talking about those people down on Highway 58 and these people. We're all people, different groups working toward common goals. And we're not working together. That group on the highway should be working with a group uptown and vice versa because they all got ideas. There's no reason for little groups doing this and that we're doing that for specific purposes like the railroad and stuff, and we'll talk about that. But all those groups should be tying in somewhere along the line and working together because we're working, in some cases, you get to start working against each other, and that doesn't work either very well.
Go ahead.
You know, there's not a person in America that doesn't know about the Hatfields and McCoys. And I just learned about Willamette City, where it was started by two guys having an argument up at City Hall, and one of them saying, we'll go start our own city. And they did it well. I've been talking to the businesses in the Chamber of Commerce, and I said, every business on Highway 58 should have welcome to historical Willamette City. And people will ask. I thought we were in Oak Ridge. Every clerk should know that story. Every gas attendant should know that story. Let's do it. I mean, we still argue. But why do we argue? Because I won't argue with a stranger. They're not worth my time. You're family. I think of you as family.
I was saying Region Oak Ridge and Westford
You guys
argued
know
for it.
that.
Well, that's what that We Speak does. You know, it helps facilitate some of this stuff of who we are here as a community, whether it's bird watching or
That's right.
river riding or anything like that.
So I said, go for it.
Yeah, I'll try to stay calm.
Thank you, appreciate that.
I don't want to get thrown out of here. Rabble rouser. The comment was made that we all have jobs. It's just not true. There's a huge part of the community that doesn't have jobs.
That's true.
Now, a lot of that's fixed income, and a lot of people just don't want to have jobs. That's true. But that income is not there. And to me, I think the first thing, all these ideas take with generating income, generating revenue. And we got to come up with a plan to generate revenue so we have money to do all these things. And just raising taxes is not going to do it. The more you raise taxes, the fewer people are going to be here. That's just how it works. And the same problem we've got with the United States right now. So, generating income for the city is not just raising taxes.
Well, one of the things that, go ahead, sir. One of the things that I'd like to ask the two people that haven't had any comments yet, I don't want to leave you out of this process, so please join us and speak your mind if you.
Speak my mind about, well, I'd like to see the city, I haven't lived here that long. I don't have my roots here. They're not, I moved here with my husband, but his roots are from here. So, there's a certain marital pride, but as well that goes with it, I guess. I'd like to see the city, everybody, but there's the fact that it's not going to happen. there are going to be people that they don't see eye to eye. That's in where she was talking about the Hatfields and McCoys. They're never going to be, that's going to be till the end of the earth. You know, they're not going to agree. And I think there's going to be people like that here. Not everybody is always going to get along. That's a logical truth.
But, you know, one of the truths about small cities is it takes a small dedicated core of people to change the whole tone and temperament of the city. A few people of goodwill can do this, and most small cities have that cadre of people that are willing to participate in that. And I think your presence here indicates that you're willing to play some role, even if it's a role of critiquing what we're doing.
You know, I'm here to just, you know, I just got on the budget committee, and so one of my things that I was going to have put on there is a balanced budget for us.
Okay.
Not be in the hole and, you know, generate income.
I think Louis, you're right. Sir, do you want to jump in here?
Well, I don't really have a whole lot to say. It didn't sound like everybody else did.
That's all right.
I think the problem with the town, until you get some jobs going in this town, you're not gonna get anything there. It's like Skip said, you gotta get some income coming in. People working, that'll take care of your small businesses, it'll take care of 58, because you're gonna have the people here and the income to do it. So that would be, if I was you guys, that would be my main strategy, is to get some work going in this town, get some jobs, get some people coming in. There's houses going empty every day in this town.
Okay.
And that's not helping me, you know.
Well, no, yes, ma'am.
One of the things I think we want to beautify 58, give the kids something. You know, instead of doing them detention, work 15. I mean, not really.
That's,
You know,
The one thing
you
you
don't want
gotta,
women
if
taking
I could say
like
something
58.
else,
That's
the one
what I
thing you
meant.
gotta put in this strategy deal is to figure out what kind of work or businesses you want in this town and create jobs. And then go get it.
So,
They're not gonna come to you, you gotta go get it.
so John Melandon's bio-waste,
Biomass.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that a little later, because there's a meeting coming up.
No.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the council. I've taken a little bit more time than they allotted me. So I'm going to turn it over and let you guys have a dialogue here, and I'm just going to be an observant, probably not